Hi, are you ready for our podcast today? I think you'll enjoy today's lesson. But do you have any idea what it is about? I'm thinking maybe it's about love, or maybe it's about friendship. It could actually be about anything. Our story for today was written by Pearl S. Buck. She is one of literature's renowned authors. She is the writer of The Good Earth. Before we continue, please give a thumbs up to this presentation. It would be really appreciated. Thank you! Hi everyone, this is Miss Sans here. Today we will be discussing on The Good Deed by Pearl S. Buck. So we'll try to cover all of these interesting parts of the story all throughout our discussion. So this would serve as a sort of a sample for our podcast that you will be doing per group. So here in the presentation, you will see the author background, the background of the story, the exposition, rise in action, the elements, tones, figurative language, style, the purpose of the author, the conclusion, and of course the works cited or our references. So for the background of the author, Pearl S. Buck spent her youth in China. Though her name sounds as if it's American or North American, she's actually an American, but she spent her youth in China. So she founded the East and West Association in 1941, and at age 6, Buck was homeschooled by her mother for the early part of the day and taught by a Chinese tutor during the afternoon. So that's probably why she is very much familiar with the culture, and most of her stories revolve around her youth, or I guess the culture and the traditions of the Chinese people. So the background of the story is as follows. It was published in 1933, and the original title of it is A Husband for Lily. For our exposition, so there is a Chinese woman forced to move to America with her son's family. So her name is Old Mrs. Span. So Old Mrs. Span clings to Chinese traditions and misses China. She's not used to moving to America. Of course, anybody who goes to a different place, even if we are just, having our tour or having our vacation there, it's a lot to get used to whenever we enter a new territory. And most especially, Mrs. Pan is expected to live there for the rest of her life, so it's a big adjustment, I should say. So the characters are Mr. Pan, the husband, Old Mrs. Pan, the mother, so she is the mother of Mr. Pan. Young Mrs. Pan is the wife of Mr. Pan. Miss Lily Yang is the young Mrs. Pan's friend. And James Lim is the man that Old Mrs. Pan set up with Miss Lily. So you already have an idea how this would go. So of course we are going to see how these characters revolve around each other. Most especially our main character, Old Mrs. Pan. So in the beginning, it was a bit depressing since Mrs. Pan was not really used to her new life in the US. But towards the middle or the end, it becomes actually cheerful because we're going to find out what exactly the good deed Mrs. Pan did for one of our characters. The setting of the story is, of course, America, particularly in New York City. So Old Mrs. Pan becomes depressed. Mr. Pan notices and he and his wife try to help her. So for the rising action, Miss Lily Yang, who is a social worker in the city, was introduced to Old Mrs. Pan. So this is actually a good move that young Mrs. Pan introduces Lily to Old Mrs. Pan, since Lily Yang is known to speak in Chinese. And one of the reasons why Old Mrs. Pan is depressed is because nobody speaks to her in Chinese, not even her grandchildren. And that's a good thing that Lily Yang enters her life, since she is now able to speak fluently to to Lily Yang without, being embarrassed about their language. So the climax is that talking with Lily lightens old Mrs. Pan's mood and gives her a purpose. So old Mrs. Pan vows to find her a husband. This is the good deed of the story. So she finds out that Lily Yang is still single. So what she does is she vows to find her a husband in return of the kindness of Lily Yang towards her. For the following action, old Mrs. Pan looks out the window and sees a nice-looking man whose name is Mr. James Lim. She goes to the store across the street where he works, so she talks to him about Lily. And finally, old Mrs. Pan found a man for Miss Lily and has arranged for their marriage. So some of the elements are as follows. So the internal conflict is that old Mrs. Fan finds it difficult to accept American customs. The ways of the foreigners did not interest her. So this is an example of internal conflict because she struggles with the American ways. And like what I said, it's really something that everybody, I guess, experiences whenever we have, new territories to enter. It's like testing the waters all the time. Like when we go to, let's say, another country, it's not really easy for us to get used to, especially since old Mrs. Pan has lived in China for all her life, so it's not really that easy for her to adjust to new boundaries or to new cultures and traditions. And she doesn't really know much how to speak in English even, so it's not really that it's not going to make her really confident, I guess, and it would really make her depressed, and I myself would feel really depressed about it. So it's not really my kind of cup of tea as well. So I guess we can sympathize with her with all the things that is happening to her. Yeah. The external conflict is that I think it revolves around the good deed itself. So it's a conflict because, well, we cannot really force someone to actually like someone and get married to her, blah blah blah. So it's not easy, I guess. But in the culture and the tradition of the Chinese, it's normal. It's normal to set up someone with another person even though they are completely strangers. So let's get used to that as well. The protagonist is, of course, old Mrs. Pan. So she's the protagonist because she tries to help Miss Lily. This quote represents that the protagonist says she will arrange everything, meaning she will help her find a husband. So it is she already put in her responsibility that she will take care of Lily in terms of her relationship or with her marriage. The antagonist is young Mr. Pan. Not really. Maybe he is just considered, I guess, not really agreeing all the time with his mother. That's why he's considered an antagonist. So, in Filipino, we call that kontrabida. So it's not necessarily a bad person, but someone who disagrees with our protagonist. So of course, the theme is good deeds benefit others as much as the person who carries them out. This shows the theme because old Mrs. Pan was happy with herself, but she also helped Lily Yang. But you will notice in the end of the story, it's not really said if old Mrs. Pan was successful with her setup, because basically Mr. Lim and Lily Yang just meet, then they smile at each other, and that's that. So we're not really sure if it was a successful match or not. Personally, to me, it was. I mean, who wouldn't want Lily Yang and Lim, or Mr. Lim, sorry, to not end up together, no? So it's one of the highlights of the story if they will be a match or not. And let's give a round of applause also to Mrs. Pan, who taught us that gratitude is very important, and whoever we are, whatever nationality we have, it's always good to give gratitude to those who are, helpful to us, or to those who are accepting us, even though we are new in the environment that we are living in. So, yeah, that is it. That is it for our podcast for today. I hope that you'd learn something. I hope also that you will tend to appreciate some important things or highlights or notes like this. I'm sure that you will do your best in presenting your own podcast because you are with your group mates. So, thank you so much. May God bless you, and let's keep these stories we love in our hearts.